we always felt that VC was slightly broken in some ways, whereby founders would only realize that VCs weren't going to provide them value after they had put their investment in.
Welcome back to 40-Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders, all in just 40 minutes. Today, we're joined by Ruari Bell, founding partner at the Players Fund, the UK's first athlete-led firm founded to empower the athlete community as investors. The Players Fund brings together a collective of world-renowned athlete investors, including Ben Stokes, former 40-Minute Mentor guest Dame Jessica Ennis-Hill, Jos Butler, Allyson Felix, Serge Gnabry, and many, many more. Prior to founding the Players Fund, Ruari, with his brother Fergus Bell, an ex-professional footballer, carved out successful careers in entrepreneurship and investing, including building the first athlete entrepreneurial collective Forecast, an award-winning real estate business and creative media agency. I am super excited to welcome Ruari onto the show and hear all about his career to date, understand more about the story of the Players Fund and their portfolio, and hear a bit about his plans for the future. So Ruari, a huge welcome to 40-Minute Mentor. Thank you so much for joining us. How are things?
Thanks, James. Yeah, all good. Thank you. Good this side. Nice to have a little bit of a summer break whilst I'm in Denmark at the moment. So it's nice.
Fantastic. I think you are our first guest recording from Denmark, so this is exciting for us. We always like to get us started by warming you up with some quick fire questions. So please finish the following sentences after me. Being a successful VC means to me...
I'd say identifying the highest potential founders and companies in the world, first and foremost, and for us to be able to create significant value and impact that no other VC really can in the space that we work with athletes.
Love that. And the moment in my career I'd love to go back to is...
Probably our first investment through the Players Fund, and having the feeling of calling up the founder and delivering the good news that we were there to back and support, with capital, but also with the impact that we can bring.
Amazing. I can't wait to explore this more in a bit more detail soon. I wish I could tell my younger self.
I would say to focus on your network, build a diverse network early, take as many meetings as possible so that you can help expand and know as many people that can really move the needle in the industry.
Yeah, it's great advice. I've always been a big advocate for that saying, your network is your net worth. And it's at the heart of our business and actually the evolution of this podcast. And it's amazing what doors can be opened from just saying yes and taking the meetings and building it out. Final quickfire question. The one thing I'd love to change about VC is?
Probably increasing levels of diversity and inclusion. There's a big kind of veil over VC that makes it confusing to get involved with, not necessarily easy to understand around acronyms and certain sayings like that. I think it can actually be broken down into a much more simpler world. So be able to open up that opportunity to many different people.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you very much. Well, it's a real pleasure to have you on the podcast. I was doing a bit of research beforehand and I absolutely love what the Players Fund is doing and I'm super excited to dive into all that. But before we do, we always like to start with learning about our guests' upbringing. So do you mind sharing a bit about what that was like and what were your early aspirations as a kid?
Yeah, absolutely. I was born and bred in Durham in the northeast of England. Most people know it as being not too far away from Newcastle, which is a bigger city, but Durham's a kind of small cobblestone city, if you can call it that, a bit more like a town. So born and bred there, school there, went to Durham School, which is the fourth oldest rugby school in the world. Elder sibling Fergus, who will probably come up in the podcast later. Middle sibling Flora, who also works in sport actually now. But yeah, quiet town. Lucky enough to play some amazing sport at school, played rugby there. It was very much about everything you can do outside of just education, with theatre, with music, with sport, with understanding how to basically become a well-rounded individual, which I think is very important than just the grades that you get or potentially the university that you go to. Used to go surfing quite a lot when I was younger in the northeast of England, which was always great for the fitness when it came to the rugby pitch. A lot of I used to play back row. So a lot of the back rows actually have a bit of a trend of being surfers. Helps with the upper body fitness, but also makes you tough going in the sea at Tynemouth when it's about 1 degree and there's snow on the ground, and you're head to toe with gloves and a hood on and trying to battle through some pretty heavy waves and the water's black. But loved growing up in Durham. I couldn't really have asked for a better upbringing with school and family and the friends that I had developed there through sport and through Durham School.
Amazing. Sounds idyllic. And I'm not a great surfer, but I can certainly, the few times I've tried, it's absolutely battering on the body. So I can imagine that's great training as a back row. I guess you are a former athlete yourself, a very accomplished semi-professional rugby player. Can you tell us a bit about kind of that love for sport? It sounds like you were exposed to it early on and, played a very good standard. I know that's obviously sort of carried through your career, but what impact has it had on your life and career, would you say?
It's always been the epicenter of everything that we've kind of done as a family. Dad was a keen sportsman, rugby, football, cricket. Mum was more down the water sports side of things, with being a keen water skier, and used to surf and bodyboard in Devon when she grew up as well, on her side of the family. So I guess I'm a product of both of them. Mainly went down the rugby route, played at Durham School, very high standards there, and at Falcons Academy when I was younger. Continued to play, thought about going professionally instead of going to university, but was basically seeing what Fergus was going through as a professional athlete in the football world, the kind of injuries that he had to deal with, the difficulties that he had, and understanding how you can progress through the sporting world and how difficult it would be. So I decided to go to St Andrews University instead. Continued to play rugby there at a decent standard. We used to have our varsity against Edinburgh Uni at Murrayfield, which was a great experience in front of about 10, 15,000 students all cheering. So yeah, rugby's always been at the epicenter in sport. And I think it just teaches you a lot about teamwork, working with people, the grit, the determination you need to succeed, which is massively important when we're dealing with founders, or actually just continuing to push forward with some of the things that we're doing in this business world as well. Because you need to be as consistent as possible. You can't really give up. You got to turn up every day and keep working as hard as possible. And all of those characteristics come from everything that we learned in sport.
Yeah, so true. I think it sounds like we had very similar upbringings, sport very much at the epicenter. And I think it does teach you a lot about teamwork and resilience and that work ethic that you need to succeed. So I completely agree. I guess we're going to come on to talking about the Players Fund in a lot more detail, but I know the kind of origin story stems from knowing firsthand how difficult that transition from professional sport can be. I know your brother obviously has been through that experience, and you played a very high level of rugby as well. What would you say is the most difficult part for athletes when they're navigating that transition? I guess particularly we ask this for anyone that might be listening to this going through a similar sort of situation right now. So anything that we could share with them to help them through that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think probably one of the most difficult elements is a loss of identity, always being known as being the person in football or rugby or cricket or whatever the sport is. Because you start at such a young age, it's everything you do, everything you know, you put all your time, your energy, your effort into becoming the best that you can be within that discipline. When you move away from it, it's very hard to understand actually who am I outside of that. I remember speaking to Fergus when he had to stop playing football because of his knee injury, and he would be walking down the street and just thinking, what do I do next? I haven't really had the support system for people to prepare me for this life outside of sport. And it just ends very abruptly. And often at a young age, if you're lucky enough to get to about 35 to retire in your sport, it's decent enough. And you've got the majority of the rest of your life to still work out what you then need to do in a professional capacity. So I think one of the hardest things is losing that identity of what you have been for the majority of your life. And then realizing that, it's just the next chapter. It's not necessarily the end of everything that you were. Not everyone looks at you as just being that sporting individual. There's much more to you as a person. So I think to help with that transition, it's about making sure that you are being supported by the right people that can help you with that, so that they can give you guidance that you can do other things outside of sport. There are other routes. It's not the be all and end all. It feels like it at the time, but there are many other things that you can go on to do and be successful at. But it's just having the support from other people that you can do it.
Yeah, totally. I think that's what I think is so great about what you're building and the impact you've had in sport and talking about this topic, because I've spoken to a few athletes over the years who have just felt totally lost especially if it's an abrupt injury, you've spent your whole life gearing towards this one thing, and then out of nowhere it's ripped away from you. And I think in certain sports are better. I think sports in general are probably getting better at this, but it can be just so isolating. And so I think it's really important to talk about this topic more, and for there to be more support, because actually the transferable skills from being an athlete, as we will probably come on to talk a bit more about, are so valuable to many companies, particularly in the startup world. We're seeing ex-athletes move into the startup world a lot, and you can just see the impact they can have, but they just need to know that that is an option for them and be supported with that journey. So I'm really glad we're talking about that today. I guess sort of before the Players Fund, and we're going to come on to talk more about it, but you had a lot of entrepreneurial success yourself. So would love to hear a bit more about your early career and some of the businesses that you built before the Players Fund was launched.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first company I started was called SMD Co, which was mainly an agency helping early stage founders and businesses with their go-to-market strategy, product market fit, a lot of their back-end sales funneling as well. So I gained a decent level of understanding of what made a good founder, what made a good business, and more importantly, what didn't make a good founder or didn't make a good business, or ones that would have that kind of longevity. Because I was able to understand the sales funneling on the back end and the ad management, I could see putting X in one side of the machine that we managed as an agency would produce Y out the other end. And sort of think, actually, because of the capital that I've grown throughout the company, I actually want to start reinvesting it into these businesses to see it go further and to scale up my investment and angel expertise. So I started to do that alongside Fergus whilst he was playing football. That was a great level of insight. Fergus and I had started a few different businesses. We also have a property portfolio in our background, and had also started up a storage business previously and some other community-based companies that had done decently well. So based on that knowledge, we started to grow out our angel investing experience. Once I finished St. Andrews University, I actually set up another agency in London, focusing on kind of ad management for early stage companies and increasing our angel investment portfolio. And from that point on, it came to COVID, something that I'll probably talk about later. And those two agencies actually lost a lot of clients, which we did foresee at the time could happen. And that is this is the problem with the agency model, is that people can pull out quite last minute. And that was a great experience and learning curve for me. But I'm glad that Fergus and I were able to invest into a lot of decent businesses throughout that period of our experience building back in the early days. So that was SMD, and then there was a company called Tidal Media House. And then we actually were speaking to a number of athletes that we knew in the space, and with one of our good friends from Durham, Mike Turns. And we set up a company called Forecast with Ben Stokes, Stuart Broad, and Jofra Archer. A lot of the athletes that we used to play with or friends of ours in the space were constantly saying, oh, we've seen you invest into businesses. We've seen you do property developments. We've seen the way in which you're kind of understanding the entrepreneurial world. We want to get more involved in that, but we don't really know how to. So we said, no problem. We'll set up a company together called Forecast, about forecasting life outside of sport and after sport with athletes. So that was an entrepreneurial on-ramp. We'd worked with a number of blue chip companies like Red Bull, Activision, Wingstop recently, Live Golf, Ryder Cup, different blue chip companies in the space to help athletes understand more about business opportunities, but also to do kind of media and production opportunities outside of sport, so that they could see the way in which they could influence big companies and the way in which they can be beneficial to those opportunities as well. As we developed out Forecast, they wanted to also do some angel investing and to own percentages of the companies, because we said the archaic way of dealing with athletes or working with them in sponsorship form was, I'll give you £50,000. You can hold the product. I'll put you on the billboard. That's it. Fergus and I were always interested in the concept of, if you're going to be putting your time, effort, and energy into backing a business, you may as well have ownership in that early stage company, as long as you've done the right kind of due diligence, understanding the founder, understanding the market, all the right things that you should be doing. And the athletes were really interested in that concept, that they could have more of an impact by having ownership in the company instead of just being paid cash and then hoping to see it do well, as we've seen with great examples with Andy Murray, Castor, Roger Federer, and on. There are loads of different examples. And a lot of our friends in America were doing similar things, which was kind of a precursor to what we now do at the Players Fund, the way in which we add impact to these kind of companies.
That's awesome. Sounds amazing. And you alluded to COVID being a difficult time. I'd love to know, from all these entrepreneurial endeavors, what have been the most challenging aspects of your journey, or the steepest learning curves you had to kind of like learn from?
Fergus and I are big believers in spending a lot of time in person. I know it's kind of ironic whilst I'm actually in Denmark for my week off, but we're strong believers in spending time together in the office. Keeps communication faster. I always feel like it's better to have a in-office, in-person dynamic, so you can build up kind of team morale, a personality about a brand, personality about what you're building. And similar to sports, it's always nice when you're managing a team or working with individuals that you're actually with them face to face. So COVID was difficult in that we always love being in person with our team, the people that we work with, and also the people, founders of companies, athletes, investors, things like that. So COVID was difficult in that we couldn't do that. So a lot of it we had to transition to being online. So that was fairly difficult when we're trying to keep momentum with everything that we're doing across the portfolio of companies.
Yeah, I can imagine that was pretty tricky, but I guess it's probably taught you lots of other things and ways that you can work in different ways as well, which we've seen from companies. Although we're definitely seeing a move back to the office for a lot of our clients. I guess Forecast sounds like it's been incredibly impactful. You've had a lot of success. What's been the biggest highlight so far with the work you've done with Forecast?
There's the one company that we did an investment into, Sixers. It's a social entertainment cricket-based company that you might have come across. Seeing the growth from when we initially got involved, seeing the impact that we've had on the company and increasing exposure, and it makes sense as an investment. Being cricket-based, a lot of our athletes within Forecast being some of the top cricketers in the world, like Rahul, Ben Stokes, Jos Butler, Popey. So the way in which we can actually impact that company, introduce other investors, introduce opportunities, other venues around the world, global exposure, and then seeing how that company has grown, and then obviously the valuation increase as well from our initial entry point. So that's one of the highlights. So helping out the founder, but then also seeing how that is also beneficial to the athletes and their ownership that they have in the company.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant, and that's a really great segue actually into my next question. We've had the real privilege of interviewing a number of sporting legends on this podcast. You know, from footballers like Stilian Petrov to Jess Ennis-Hill and coaches like Clive Woodward, and many of them have actually made a successful pivot into entrepreneurship or investing or other ventures. What are some of the transferable traits that you think make athletes such good entrepreneurs or operators or even investors?
Yeah, it's a good question. One we love to speak about often. I think I alluded to it before, but the discipline to be the top 1% in their field is so important. And that's what they can kind of bring to business, showing up every day, putting everything into it, the ability and the want to learn and to be the best that they possibly can. There's a competitive drive and an edge to that as well that you see in sport that is really important in business, teamwork. Is cricket, rugby, football, the ones that I come back to a lot, but dealing with individuals, knowing what helps make an individual tick. Sometimes on the pitch, it might be shouting at them to get them aggravated and get going. Sometimes it's an arm around their shoulder, having a quiet word. But at the end of the day, it's about getting a result out of an individual. Same thing in sport as it is in business. So they're the three main things with the discipline, the kind of competitive edge, consistency, but then it's really knowing how to deal with individuals regardless of what you're working on.
Love that. And I guess on the flip side of that, what do athletes, from your experience, tend to struggle with when it comes to launching a new business? Because this is obviously something that we're seeing a lot of people think about doing, rightly so, diversifying their experience. But are there things you feel like anyone listening to this that might be in that position right now should really be thinking about, whether it's as they come to the end of their sporting career, to really get ahead when they make those sorts of moves?
Yeah, I think the main thing they should do is just start learning, start being in the room. So talking about the Players Fund, what we try to do is have private events with a lot of our athletes so that they can be in the same room with us, with founders of companies, with investors, with partners. So just start by being in the right place, asking any question. We always say there's no such thing as a stupid question. Don't feel shy. That's why we create a safe environment for our global collective whereby they can ask anything. It's really just start, make it a small incremental step, and then they'll start to get interested. They'll find areas that they're more interested in, markets, business opportunities, but just really get involved and start by trying to learn. Everything comes back to education. because the more you know about certain spaces, the more impactful you can be for these kind of companies, and the more you'll enjoy it. The main thing is that it should be enjoyable as well.
Love that. Great advice. Thank you, Rory. We've got to talk about Players Fund. That's the main reason we're here. And we've kind of alluded to the story a bit, but do you mind talking us through kind of that origin story, how it really came into the world off the back of Forecast, and particularly your investment thesis? We'd love to hear that if you don't mind.
So the Players Fund, first and foremost, is the first UK-based athlete-led VC firm. So we basically try to democratize access to early-stage VC opportunities. We have a global collective of athletes, predominantly in the UK, with Jessica Ennis-Hill, as you referred to earlier, Ben Stokes, Chris Smalling, John Terry. We also have athletes based in India with KL Rahul, athletes in America with Allyson Felix, Carlos Boozer, Sheldon Day. And we basically bring together our global collective of athletes to invest in the best possible opportunities. We're a generalist fund, so we invest at seed and Series A stages, investing £50,000 to £300,000 initially, and then can double down with follow-on tickets up to about £500,000. Our investment thesis is that we're fairly generalist investors, but we look for tech-enabled startups. We look for business models like business B2B2C based business models, whereby they can have a shiny front end that can be attractive to consumers, but also we can really move the needle with the business to business network opportunities. So yeah, that's mainly what the fund is, but we also provide events. We have an education curriculum for athletes so that they can learn about the fundamentals of investing, what to look for in pitch decks, how to understand what founders should and shouldn't be doing. It's really about a community, but the main mission is to enable them to invest into the best opportunities.
Love that. It's such a great idea, and clearly having a lot of traction, given that you partnered with some of the most iconic names in world sport that you mentioned. So would love to know how those partnerships came about, and I guess how the fund is operating sort of at the moment. You've kind of evolved it probably from a few early sort of adopters, and then I guess grown it to where it is today. So we'd love to hear a bit more about that journey and where you're up to in the cycle of the business.
Yeah, the main way in which we started the Players Fund was through our connections at Forecast. So having started Forecast with Ben Stokes, Stuart Broad, and Jofra Archer, and Mike Turns. So the work that we did building out the business opportunities there and then introducing them to the concept of investing and having an impact on early stage companies. Through doing certain investments in the space, Fergus and I had also invested with a number of our other partners, like Calvin Au, who's now our head of investments, who's got 18 years of experience in early stage VC with Founders Factory in Malton, and also with Phil Green, another GP of ours, who was the ex-CFO of Amazon and Deliveroo. So we basically spoke about the concept at Forecast around basically professionalizing an investment vehicle, creating a GP LP structure, but also with a wider global collective. So we Forecast our founding members, the company and the athletes involved in Forecast. But through our network and working on certain deals and business opportunities in the space, we also brought in the For Good Collective, which includes Chris Smalling as a founding member of the Players Fund, Serge Gnabry and Hector Bellerin, along with Essen Shah at Be Engaged as well, came through. So we brought together a lot of our athletes that we'd worked with in the space, done investments with, and other business opportunities to create this as a founding collective for the firm. And then through the trust and backing of those individuals, we've managed to bring together a wider collective that are also interested in having further European exposure. So a lot of the American athletes understand exactly what we're doing because it's not a new concept over there for athletes to invest into early stage opportunities, especially at the kind of seed and Series A stage. So we brought in a lot of American athletes that wanted further European exposure. Same in India as well, that want some further UK and European exposure.
Makes sense. Thank you very much. And how have you found having these kind of high profile sporting legends involved in the fund? How has that helped, and what sort of impact has that had for founders, that you're investing in?
Good question. First of all, absolutely love working with the individuals that we work with. Question we get a lot of the time is, what they really like. Everyone that we work with are exceptionally kind, switched on, very driven, which is important for what we're building. they are founders in the firm. They're not just sitting on the sideline at an arm's length. They get involved. They like to have meetings with founders. They like to be as impactful as possible for the companies that we work with. So it really is a joy to work with some of the athletes that we have involved as investors and founding partners. And the impact that we can have on companies can vary massively. We tend to say it's really the network that we can unlock that can have a huge impact to really move the needle, can provide credibility, can provide insights for product development, and can also help with media distribution. So a lot of the time before we actually invest, we always felt that VC was slightly broken in some ways, whereby founders would only realize that VCs weren't going to provide them value after they had put their investment in, after they had bought shares in the company, and then they ask for help, and sometimes they don't get it. So we didn't really like that. We thought, let's show the value we can bring to the table first, introduce them to people we know in the space, in the sporting arena. If it makes sense for a ticketing company, we'll introduce them to La Liga, people who we know at La Liga, to help them get more tickets and hospitality ownership in the venue groups. Or we can introduce them to the head nutritionist at the UCB, or some top doctors that we know if it's a medical care business. Really actually put two and two together to have an impact on potential top line revenues first. And then when we come in, they're wanting us to come in because we've already proven to them that we can actually add a lot of value to the table. A lot of the time, that's Fergus and I thinking strategically about what makes sense for this company to provide growth at such an early stage, and how that can really impact the top line revenues, but also the B2B contracts that they might be able to build in the background. And just having a global collective of athletes, but also professional investors, other tier one VCs that we work with in the space, we can help to join the dots even before we start to invest, so that they can see that we are genuine partners. We're not just invested capital, but we're there to help.
Love that. Yeah, that added value in that thinking longer term, I can really see how that can make a real difference. I spoke with a founder recently who was he's an AI startup founder, a lot of interest from top VCs, and he had lots of opportunities, but he ended up going with the one that went above and beyond to secure their first client with it before committing to investing. And that really just landed for him in a different way. And he just thought, you're already thinking as a partner. And I just think that foresight is something that would really resonate with me. And I think for any founders listening to this, I think, that's the sort of thing you want to hear. So because so much of it is about trust. And I think if people believe that you believe in their product or service, then and can do that by opening up your network, that's a really powerful thing to say.
VC is very much about finding the best possible opportunities, but then you've also got to win those opportunities as a VC. You got to prove to them that you are going to do what you say. So the best way, we always say, to show them what we can do and what we want to do is by doing it before we necessarily put in a ticket. Then it helps you win the allocation and actually show that you are there to be partners and not just capital.
I love that. You mentioned your consumer focus to date, Ruari, and the kind of marketplace being very appealing to you. So I guess for any founders listening to this that really want Players Fund to invest in them, what makes founders and their businesses stand out to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think although we're generalist investors, we like to look at kind of tech-enabled early stage startups, which have a B2B2C based business model. But it doesn't have to. The reason being is that you can have quick scalability for those opportunities. And being a VC fund, we need to look to have venture returns, get in early, but help have fast scalability of that business. So what we kind of look for in founders is a really deep understanding of the market that they're working in, have a clear vision about the white space and the problem that they're trying to solve. But because we invest at seed and Series A, that's early. So they always have to have the capability to be able to adapt to certain challenges as well, and be able to have kind of really strong leadership skills so that they can explain to their team, why they may need to transition to something different, because every founder at some stage will have to transition and change their business model. It's really about how well they can do that. So passion is obviously very important for the founders that we look into, but they need to be also pragmatic about the future of their business and the way in which they need to adapt to survive and make sure that it will be successful.
Yeah, great tips for anyone listening who might be in this situation right now. And I guess on the flip side of that, what are the things that put you off when companies and founders are pitching to you for investment?
That's a good question too. I think ones that don't take feedback well. I know that seems very simple and obvious, but I like to ask a question, actually just look at the way in which the founder reacts to it to see how they will react to certain problems that will arise down the line. So if you see their body change in certain ways, they get defensive and crunch up and kind of shut themselves off, I always think they're not actually open to the kind of feedback that they need to be open to in order to understand their market, their customers, the problems that will arise down the line better. They really need to be as open as possible and take it on well. They can't get angry and be emotional about it. You've got to be very pragmatic. It's something that we work on a lot as a firm as well. We try to ask our athletes as much as possible, how can we improve? What do you think makes sense? But the most important question is, what don't you like? Tell us what you don't like and be as honest as possible. You're not going to hurt our feelings. It's only going to make the product better. And in the long run, it will last longer because you've got a better product out there.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice, because when it's your baby, you can understand there's a natural tendency potentially to kind of feel a bit defensive and protective over what you build. But actually, the only way you're going to raise from top VCs is if you're able to take on feedback and adapt and evolve. And that will be an essential part of that early stage journey. So I think it's a brilliant point. So thank you for sharing that. I know you've got a evolving fantastic portfolio already, so I'm sure our listeners would love to learn a bit more about it. What have been some of the standout investments you've made to date?
Sure. One of my favorites is Seat Unique. So it's a premium hospitality ticketing service that you might have seen around. They're kind of announcing new venue deals every kind of 3 or 5 days. Robin, Sherry and Philippa have done an exceptional job. So we invested into Seat Unique last year. They're the 4th fastest growing startup on Sifted's top 100 in the UK and Ireland. They've done about 530% compound annual growth rate in the last 12 months. Been seriously impressed with the team. They come from they have great experience in that sector, but I love the fact that they saw this white space and saw that hospitality ticketing was broken. There was no trust there with the individual. It was still kind of archaic, having to call up hospitality ticketing sales platforms, asking for tickets for corporates. And, since COVID, they really saw that people were willing and happy to spend more to have better seats, better experiences at some of the best shows or sporting matches in the world. And they just spotted that white space, thought we're going to focus on that only, and do it as well as possible. And, their growth is credit to them for really finding a space that people are willing to spend more, and they've done an exceptional job. And I'm very excited about some of the things they're going to be announcing soon enough as well.
Awesome. Sounds great. And I have actually, I've used Seat Unique, and it's, you can really see why they're being so successful. It's a great proposition. I know that you also do a lot more than just investing. You have several educational partnerships you're running and events that you mentioned for athletes and entrepreneurs to come together and for them to learn and develop themselves. Do you mind sharing a bit more about the impact you're seeing from those, and anything else about that side of the business that you're particularly proud about?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a partnership with the European Sports Business School. So they do one of the top sports business masters and undergraduate degrees in Europe. Fergus and I actually are guest lecturers for the European Sports Business School, teaching about athletepreneurism, as we kind of coined it, the way in which they can get more involved in business and the impact they can have in investments and things like that. The history of that, starting with Magic Johnson back in the day in LA, a great story where he used to be playing basketball and he would take out individuals that would be sitting on the floor around the basketball court to lunch, just to learn about how they generated the wealth to buy the most expensive tickets, what their business models was, and basically how they did it. And as you know, his story, as he got his illness and had to stop playing basketball straight away, he had to quickly adapt and learn about how to succeed in the business world. I think he had one of the highest paying contracts back in the day for basketball, but compared to the over $1 billion enterprise that he's built now, it was a tiny fraction. So really understanding about the history of athletes investing in the space and business opportunities. We teach that at the European Sports Business School. And we also are building out a curriculum with the Global Institute of Sport so that athletes can learn more about the fundamentals of business, finance, early stage VC, and wider business opportunities. We also partner with a charity called Switch to Play. So when we're talking about athlete transition, that's exactly what they do. So they can help talk with athletes about how they can basically transition into life outside of sport. And when I'm talking about identity and a lot of the psychological impact that moving away from sport can have, they really help with that. So it's not just the education that we can provide, but it's also the hands-on approach that we can bring to the table with Switch the Play, so that we can have conversations with our athletes and with the specialists at Switch the Play to really help them and be a kind of supporting firm, not just there for capital.
Love that. Yeah, such a unique value prop. And yeah, again, you can really see how like over a sustained period of time, the impact and educational side of this can have a really big impact on athletes at scale, which is really cool. I guess looking forward to the future, what's your big vision for the future of the Players Fund?
Good question. We want to be the go-to firm for athletes to invest into early stage VC and also some private equity opportunities. One of the most important things for us is that we understand the psyche of athletes. We decided not to charge athletes to be introduced into early stage VC, which is a really important part. We don't believe that they should, if they're being educated around something that's new, something they don't necessarily fully understand at first. If it's not right for them, then they also shouldn't be involved in an investment vehicle like that as well. So we want to be the ones where they can come to so that they can learn about the opportunities there, so that we can support as many athletes on a global basis about life outside of sport, so that when they do need to transition, they have the right support system there. And they can also then get opportunities with some of the best tier one VCs that we work with and some of the best early stage founders to invest into.
Love that. And for people listening to this that might be really pumped, I'm sure they will be, from the story and what you're building, and want to come on board that journey, whether that's as a potential member of the team or potentially just get involved from an athlete perspective, how can they do that? What advice would you have for them to impress? Yeah, anything else? Any other tips or pointers would be awesome to hear.
Yeah, sure. First of all, they can get in touch with us at contact@playersfund.vc. If you just put in the subject line 40-minute mentor, then I'll know that you've listened to this, and then we can have a conversation. Advice is, yeah, as I said earlier on, just start, reach out to people. Don't be shy. No one's ever going to say something mean about you reaching out, asking for advice. I think people just get paralyzed by the prospect that might happen. It doesn't tend to happen. If they can't do it for some reason, they're not going to be mean about it, but at least you've tried. So really get out there, try as much as possible to build out your network, as I was saying before, have the right kind of conversations. I think also be really detailed about the questions that you want to ask and how that might benefit the individual that you're speaking to, so that it doesn't just feel like a one-way stream of, I need your time so that I can learn about this. Think about ways in which you can actually add value to what they're doing as well. So, but just start.
Nice. It's great advice. And it's, yeah, I really, really appreciate you sharing that. We're sadly getting towards an end, but before we have our wrap up questions, Rory, I just wanted to ask about the dynamic with your brother. It sometimes, they say sometimes don't work with family, but you've clearly had continual success of running multiple businesses with your brother. So how does that dynamic work? How do you separate out family versus business? Just, I'm sure people will be intrigued about how that dynamic plays out day to day.
Yeah, I've been very lucky to have worked with him for such a long period of time, and just very lucky that we have a great dynamic, that we think differently, but also crossover in ways when we need to. I think the most important thing is just communication. We've actually never had a fight. And the main reason for that is because we talk about everything when we need to. And if something's starting to build up and we're having a divergence in thoughts, then we speak about it straight away and explain why actually I think this is a better route to go down. And just having open communications and being as transparent as possible is the best way to deal with it. I think the problem is when you don't do that, it builds. And then you start to have arguments and disagreements over things that are so small, but just because they build up over time, they feel like they're massive. So the key thing is just being communication in working together for such a long period of time. And again, very lucky that we have a great relationship, and lucky that we were brought up in a way to deal with things in certain ways and always just be honest and transparent and truthful. But yeah, communication is the key to making it work.
Sounds like a perfect team. And I think also your sporting background, so teamwork and communication and being receptive to feedback. I think these qualities can really help when it comes to that dynamic as well. So, yeah, awesome to hear you're thriving in that respect. No EastEnders type battles in the background. We're sadly at our final three wrap up questions. This is 40-minute mentor. So I have to ask you, if you could be mentored by anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I think I would say Pep, just because being one of the GOATs in terms of strategy, I would love to know where he starts in building out his kind of pipeline of, okay, I want to get to this level of success in my career. This is where I begin. This is how I break it down into small chunks. This is the way I look at it. And just the way that he stayed so consistent over the years to generate success is really, really impressive. And I think that does come down to kind of compartmentalizing what you need to do every day to build up to what that equals over a month, over 3 months, over 6 months to get you to, okay, now I've got a big trophy cabinet after being in the sporting space for so many years, but also doing it with a smile on his face and with respect is very impressive. So I would love to have a conversation with Pep for sure.
Yeah, I think that's one we'd all probably agree to. Would be an ultimate mentor in terms of elite performance and just an inspiring person. So thanks for sharing. Finally, Rory, what is the one piece of career advice that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
Do things that you don't necessarily want to do or might be a bit nerve-wracking, because throwing yourself in the deep end is probably the best way to learn and grow. So even if it doesn't feel like something you want to do at the time, or as it's getting closer towards the event or whatever happening, just do it. Even if it doesn't go 100%, then you would have learned so much that will help you get to being as good as you possibly can be when you need to.
That's a brilliant piece of advice to end a brilliant conversation. Rory, thank you so much. I really love what you're doing and the impact it's having. Super excited to see the evolution of the fund. And I wish you nothing but success for the rest of the year and beyond. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, James. Really appreciate it, mate.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. If we have left any questions unanswered, or if you have any feedback or guest recommendations for future series, then please make sure you get in touch on info@jbmc.co.uk. I often get asked by listeners how you can help us spread the word about 40-Minute Mentor. There are two simple ways you can help. Firstly, share this episode on your preferred social media platform, and LinkedIn is probably where I'm most likely to see it. And you can also leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every share on social media and review left on the podcast platforms really helps us to get 40-Minute Mentor in front of new audiences and share the power of mentorship even further. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship.